please welcome Rod Duke Rodriguez onto the stage.
Thank you much.
Pleasure. I'm getting better at this, aren't I? I'm even adding the right things to it.
I know 15 minutes goes very quickly, so I'm going to actually change my presentation slightly and kind of tie into the two presentations you've already heard, which were excellent presentations about where we're going. I'm just going to introduce some different concepts to you so that you can kind of tie some of this together. First, I want to focus on the World Health Organization. Does everybody know what the definition of health according to the World Health Organization, unamended, unchanged since the 1940s, 1948? Because we tend to think that it all relates to just the treatment of illness. More importantly, the World Health Organization describes it as health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Now, the important part about this, if you think about cannabis, cannabis is focused on all those areas, the physical, the mental, and the social well-being. But we don't have to debate recreational versus medical. I think it all is encompassed by cannabis. And the reason I use this as a backdrop to give you kind of my background and why I'm so committed to what we do at Ultra Health and why we tied to Panaxia here in Israel is I am a healthcare professional. I've operated a hospital. I've done deals with HCA. I ran a large insurance company. I've done deals with Cigna. I've employed physicians. We actually employed 350 physicians. I ran a pharmacy benefit management company, a New York Stock Exchange company, publicly traded. I was a CEO and president of a New York Stock Exchange company. So I've seen this whole issue from a number of sides, and I was not an early adopter of cannabis because I wanted to see if it really was these things that were promised. But I can tie it to a little bit of history in this country. You've heard discussion about the FDA. We've got to go through phase 1. We've got to go through phase 2. We've got to go through phase 3 clinical trials. I want to give you a little bit of history that I'm accustomed to. Does everybody know what Tagamet is? If you've heard Tagamet, raise your hand. Great. So you understand Tagamet. Do you understand this was the #1 blockbuster drug in America ever? Okay? This product sold $1 billion, all right? This was going to be the cure to guess what? Ulcers. And it was because of anxiety. You may not have recognized there was a doctor, Dr. Barry Marshall, who went contrary to what all public communication science showed us. Here's a drug that went through rigorous phase 1, phase 2 clinical trial studies. It had to do what it said it did, right? And we sold $1 billion. The first drug to cross that $1 billion mark. I was on Tagamet. I believed it. I can tell you it really didn't do much. But how couldn't it? It was proven to be what it was supposed to be. Now this gentleman, compare it to cannabis. This doctor said, I think you're wrong. I think it's a bacterial. I think it's a bacteria issue, not what you're saying it is. But here, all these tests had proven, all the clinical trials were there. It's purely, your comments are purely anecdotal. We've got science to prove that it's something else. But we all know cannabis has moved beyond anecdotal, and the proof is there. And we will have to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, but we're having something done different than we've never had before. We're able to experiment and see before it gets there. It might not be the perfect path. It might be a little ugly at first, but it's going to bring up that anecdote into those areas we should focus on pain, on opiate addiction, on different categories, PTSD. It's coming. Interesting story here. If you haven't seen it, you're probably wondering why the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. To close the story, Dr. Barry Marshall, he got tired of all the clinical tests, trying to prove what it was. One Easter Sunday, he took the interior oil bile of a patient who had a confirmed ulcer, and guess what he did? He drank it. And guess what occurred 3 days later? He started to vomit, diarrhea, and had an ulcer. It isn't always just science. Sometimes it's intuition. You think we're going to go to that scene? Smoke 2 joints and call me in the morning. The reality is that's not going to be what healthcare is going to be in this country. Healthcare is going to evolve to a more sophisticated, and it should. It's not going to be this. For somebody who's worked with the medical staff, I can tell you, as the former hospital administrator, and you walk up there and you tell the docs, this is what they should do, and they say, thank you very much, we're going to do what we really want to do, okay? We're not going to convince them to go to take 2 joints and call me in the morning. They want to see medicine, and we have an obligation to give them that medicine. So you're going to see new products emerge. We realize, and for those, I mean, anybody in here a cultivator who grows cannabis? I'm a cultivator. Any of you operate dispensaries out there? I operate dispensaries. I can tell you what it's like. We have 10% of our market in our state in New Mexico. You can't find that anywhere in this country where anybody's gotten 10% of one market. So we've been able to see what works and what doesn't. We are the largest chain in our state. We are the largest producer in our state. We run greenhouses. We're doing this on tribal land. We've got a very diverse model. So we've seen it. But it's not just medicine. We realize we've got to go there. Now that may scare you, but it's necessary. Because when we tell you it's 10 milligrams of THC or 10 milligrams of CBD, what should you expect it to be? 10 milligrams. How many of you have ever tried a Medable, all right? It's an experiment in itself, all right? Let's be honest. We've taken Medables off the shelf. We've taken our own product. We've broken them back down. We determined the reliability. Guess what? Medicine that was determined to be 10 milligrams had anywhere from 30% to 130% more on the high side. And on the low side, sometimes there was no medical ingredient in there at all. Products that were deemed to be high CBD had, guess what? 0 CBD. We can't do that. We have to have products that are reliable, that are consistent, that are pharmaceutical grade. That's the big difference. Not only is there the medicalization of cannabis, there's basically the importance of moving to pharmacy grade products. Why is that important? It's important in reimbursement. You want to get paid for what you do, right? Then you better deliver what you promise. You're probably wondering, what's this picture here? It's another thought for you to consider where we're going and why it'll happen on an even faster pace. Remember we talked about that billion-dollar drug called Tagamet? The first blockbuster drug ever to sell $1 billion. Cannabis is a blockbuster drug. Guess how much cannabis they sold in Colorado in 2016? $1.2 billion. It's a blockbuster drug, and they did that in one state. State of Washington, larger than the state of Colorado. They're already going to break 1.5 billion. State of California, bigger than Colorado and California combined, and they're going to sell, guess what? Potentially over 8 billion. And it's going to come in all forms. It's going to come in dried flower, it's going to be crushed, it's going to be processed, it's going to be tablets, it's going to be oils, it's going to be inhalers. It's going to be more than just what you've seen before. It's not just going to be dried flower. It's going to be rectal suppositories, vaginal suppositories, and it's going to look and act and feel like medicine. And it's a good thing. We still respect the plant and its contribution, but the plant's benefit gets expanded and can be more readily measured so that every patient who gets the same dose over and over can be consistently verified that the outcome is the same. That's where we're moving to. Guess who's all going to get involved? You know what a dispensary is in the top right-hand corner and the bottom left-hand corner. We operate 7. We plan on building 14 more. We operate dispensaries. And I can tell you, they look like this, but they're looking more like the other two corners, Walgreens and Rite Aid. Everybody familiar with Walgreens or CVS? This might surprise you. In the U.S. now, 80% of the U.S. population is within 7 miles of a Walgreens. 80% within 7 miles of a Walgreens. Imagine that for a moment. And by the way, there are 8,000 plus Walgreens across the U.S. There's nearly 10,000 CVS pharmacies, even larger than Walgreens. If it's $1 billion drug in Colorado, if it's $1.2 billion in the state of Washington, and it's $5 to $8 billion in the state of California, do you think, because they are in the retail pharmacy business, do you think they're going to stay out of this business? They're just waiting until it evolves to what? Exactly. Pharmaceutical grade cannabis. This is what the distribution of dispensaries look across the country. We are but a small mosquito on an elephant's ass. The future is in a broader network of delivery. Does it dehumanize the value of cannabis? No. We're going to basically go to prime time. We're going to basically have to act and look like what we are. And we are changing what this world needs. This is a good medicine. It is good for patients. The anecdotal information that we're seeing is very positive. The actual results are real. We know the benefits. I'm not going to spend time talking about THC and CBD, but we haven't even talked about CBG, CBN. Every one of those require more production, more plants, more people, more industry, more dollars committed to this. It's only an expansion of the industry. I know some are saying, we've got to protect the sacred plant. Well, the plant's going to evolve, and this plant has been here much longer than you might guess. The tribes in America are getting involved in this. Many of you may not know it. The Navajo have a phrase, tish ash tish, which means, guess what? For 3,000 years, they call it the five-finger plant. And the Dene people, which the Navajos call themselves the Dene people, they call themselves the five-finger people. They believe there's a direct cultural and caring tie between the plant and its relationship to mankind as they see mankind and the Creator. So it has a long history beyond what we are. In the Pueblo Indians in New Mexico, they've had burial sites where they've dug up, and they believe they've found evidence of 3,000 years old of cannabis. It's a holistic, it's a natural healing. It's going to go and free up medicine in a different role. It's not maybe the miracle drug, but I tell you what, it's a close sister. It's a very close sister. Where's the future of all this going? I think we have a stage being set across this country that's going to facilitate cannabis more than it's ever been. And we didn't even have to create it. It's being created around us right now. Many of you may be familiar with the political transition occurring in the United States, or more commonly referred to now as the divided states. But there is a movement to funding healthcare different. We have two major programs in the U.S. We have Medicare and we have Medicaid. For those of you who don't know it, the Medicare program, for example, is intended for the aged. The Medicaid program is intended for the poor, disabled, and the vulnerable populations because they generally don't vote more. Some people generally feel that we can pick on them much easier because they're not a voting bloc. But either way, it's created a new world of what's called block grants. Right now, instead of paying for each transaction as it occurs, we're going to block grant everything. So that basically, they're going to give states a single sum of money, and then you'll decide what you're going to do with that money. Because of the current regulations, they cannot reimburse cannabis. You cannot use federal dollars for reimbursement of cannabis. Under a block grant environment, all bets are off. They give the state the money, and they tell the state, here's your pocket, here's your allowance of $100. Do what's best with your $100. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to bargain purchase, they're going to make the best purchase, and they're going to direct their dollars to where they can get the maximum value. You've heard value-based purchasing. You heard it earlier in the presentation. It's going to be future about value. Where do I get the biggest bang for my dollars? And guess what's going to appear very quickly? Cannabis. I've actually seen written proposals submitted to congressional staffers allowing for them to use Medicaid dollars for reimbursement for the reimbursement by Medicaid. It's actually on the table. In one state particularly, one I'm very familiar with, New Mexico, they actually have it in regulation. In regulation now, the first state to do it that says, guess what? Workers' comp injuries can get covered for cannabis and paid by the workers' comp carrier. That's a huge step. Another huge step, first state in the country, they've just passed a bill through their legislature right now sitting on the governor's desk. We don't know if the governor will sign or not sign, but the governor's got until April about the 5th. It would be the first state that puts in statute the use of cannabis for the treatment of opiate dependence. Huge step. They're also the first state to put in statute to go to cards. You know, everybody has a card for registry cards. 2-year cards, not 6 months, not 3 months, but 2 years. Eventually the card will go away and be replaced by a physician's recommendation. May not be a prescription the first phase, but it'll be a physician's recommendation, ultimately maturing to a physician's prescription. The world is changing very quickly. Cannabis is likely to become reimbursable. The insurers, we've actually had one of the largest Medicaid providers in the U.S. who covers close to, I think, 1.5 million lives, tour our grow. And I can tell you the experience he saw firsthand. What did he expect when he walked in? Not what he saw. It was clean. It was professional. It was clinical. He saw employees working with lab coats, gloves on, touching his plant, protecting and caring for everything that was occurred in the production of the plant, how we cared for it, how we sanitized it, how we tested it. And he realized it looks like medicine. And in fact, that's what it is. We're basically taking it out from the closets and the dark dens and the basements of people's home. We're commercializing it, of course. We're dressing it up, and we're giving it the best presentation possible. And that direction is going to have to be through pharmaceutical grade cannabis. We've got to evolve. We've got to step forward. And I think that's the big message you heard this morning. The science is coming together. The industry is asking for change. And I think you're going to see a lot of change, particularly over the next 24 to 36 months. And that officially, apparently, is my time. Thank you very much.